Hello, good morning. And let's see if I can get my webcam to see me. Let's see here. I remember I had to do some switcheroos last week. Here we go. All right. Well, here's me in my very untidy office area. That's the trouble with a creative mind. We're always creating and never maintaining. Um, so yeah, hi. It's Monday, October 7th, and my, how time flies. I'm Rob, that developer dad, and the past couple of months we have been working on a dotNet application um, that is going to help me at my gaming table. And as of last Thursday's last Thursday morning's session, I think we got it to a spot where it's looking pretty darn good and it's running pretty okay and stuff like that. Um, and I'm just wondering what's next for this project. I've got all kinds of things that I have to do and all kinds of things that I want to do, but the things that I have to do don't make sense yet. Just in terms of things in the real world not being quite set up for it to make sense for me to do those things yet. And um, so maybe we'll get into some things that some of the simpler things that I want to do with this application. And I'm still waiting for my uh, work machine, my lab laptop to spin up because we went away for the weekend and there must have been a power blip or something. And it shut itself off. Hey, what's up, Rev? Okay. Windows remote desktop is finally logged in. Okay, good deal. Do the thing. And I'll get Visual Studio opening. We all know booting up Windows for the first time after it's shut down can take a minute or two. Let's see here. Quasi roadmap. We'll take a look at what's going on here. The view presentation. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Main screen focus. Okay, Visual Studio, I hope, is trying to boot. Maybe. Hopefully. Perhaps. Come on. You can do it. Let's try it again. So let's see here. We styled the buttons in the task UIs. We got that knocked out late last week. We fixed up the flow and the positioning of the select options. We got that. I'm going to move this up to the top of my remaining tasks list. I want to add filter controls onto the NPC list screen. So today is just going to kind of be a grab bag of stuff, I think. Come on, Visual Studio, what are you doing? It's taking its time is what it's doing. It needs coffee. I'm not going to do anything with the task manager yet. Yes, I am. I'm impatient. And just like the rest of us, Windows does not like to wake up in the morning. Yeah, it's trying to load. Come on, you can do it. Here it comes. Close that. Load up game tools. Are you listening? It's listening slowly. Did I mention that this laptop is old? But it was found and it was free and it does the trick. How many copies of Visual Studio have I opened? That's another question. Do, 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 do. Yeah, this poor old machine. So let's see here. Improving the view presentation. What do we want to do with that? I'm not sure yet. So let's defer. And we'll add some filtering controls. So we'll bring that up to the top. There we go. It's up to loading projects now. I'm not going to mess with putting options and stuff in a div that loads as a dialog. That's something I want to do later. Pull this. just above far future and above the dice roller idea. And we'll save. I did open up multiple Visual Studios like a silly head. Here we go. All right, feels like it's responding. Project's loaded and ready to use. Background tasks are still running. I think there's a new update to Visual Studio coming soon that's going to improve the performance of some of these background task thingies on initial startup. Okay, it's restoring NuGets. It's working on it. So as soon as it comes up, we'll be able to talk about what I want to do with it. I also need to push all of these commits and get it deployed over to the Azure host. Excuse me. So I think today we're going to start working on a filter on the NPC list. But let's see if we spot anything annoying when we load in. It's just taking a minute because it's Monday and everything runs a little more slowly on Mondays. Still trying to build? Yep, apparently. There it goes. It's trying. You know what? I think instead of adding new features or adding a new feature to the screen or something like that, I had to take care of those warnings that we're seeing throughout the those compiler warnings. That was something I was considering doing for just something on my own time, but I feel like I should probably prioritize that a little better or a little more. Let's go into the NPCs. I don't think Rev's seen any of this new stuff. And of course, our database has gone for a nap. So it's taking a minute to fetch all of our NPCs because we have to wake it up too. And while it might feel like a bit of an annoying feature, my opinion is it's fine if they want to do that because, or if Microsoft does that because it saves me money. So here's show. All right, roll the dice. Okay, we'll go back to the list. We'll go to view, back to the list. And I feel like maybe I do want to throw in a filter. But I want to do some thinking about how that's going to look and how it's going to act. There's temptation to put the filter button up in here and then reveal it, like just push everything down like I have over in the new NPC area where we show like that. And that's actually not a terrible idea. Yeah. But I definitely want to fix the compiler warnings that we have, because these actually increase build times. They can be indicative of other lurking defects that just haven't reared their ugly heads. So let's start with this. Field graph service client graph proxy. We're not using it. Is that actually true? Yeah, it looks like we're just doing a straight up. Yeah. I think I had added that thinking that I might want to extract this graph stuff into a discrete class. But I don't think it's necessary. So that's never used. Save it. Build the solution. The tests I'm not going to worry about at this point. Character vocation. Wait. I'm going to close up all of these razor pages, because we're just going to go through one file at a time and make sure we have our things set. So resource kind must contain a non-null value. That's quota template SQL model. All right. These are tests. Let's keep going through here. User groups. Get async. List of directory objects. Let's think about this. Var collection equals user groups dot value is a list of directory object. So to protect us from nulls, we'll add our using up top. Groups. Equals new list of directory object. And graph groups. I'll just call it graph groups. And graph groups add range user groups dot value, or enumerable dot empty of directory object. Perfect. That fixes that. I can get rid of this namespace reference. Get rid of that namespace reference. Okay. I'm going to save. So what I did was there was a when we come back from our get async, the result of get async may be null. And inside this for each down here, it might have been trying to query into a property of an object that is null. And if that happens at runtime, it's just going to lose its mind. It's going to just get all discombobulated and crash my application. We don't want that to happen. So what I did here is I created an actual list of graph groups, or list of directory objects, which is what we will get back from get async if it's not null. And I added the value of our MS graph call. But I said, user groups, I'm going to change the name of user groups, rename to graph call result. That makes it a little bit better. So graph call result, if it's not null, give me the value. Now, if you get to this point in the line and this is null, give me one of these, which is just an empty enumerable of directory objects. And then when we get down to our for each, we are going to start looping through whatever is in this graph groups variable, even if it's empty. But we're definitely going to have something to look into. So that solves that compiler warning. Hey, Rev, I was thinking about doing some stuff in the UI today, but I've decided that I don't want to make any more capability or feature changes or anything like that beyond what I've already done here until I've got it in the hands of some users. And I don't know if you've been around since I added the sign in to Entra, and I know you definitely haven't been around to see me give it a facelift like I have. Roadmap needs some work, but we can look at our list of NPCs. We can create a new one. I've brought in some SVG icons that I've found here and there and everywhere else. I've added a little bit more styling and a little bit more UI affordances. Let's say we want a minor. We don't care about anything else, but we definitely don't want them to be retired. I figured out what I was doing wrong there last week. It was just a silly code mistake. So we've got a male dwarf minor. He's 146. Generate the AI description. You're going to love this. I brought in a little animated loading screen. And we'll save. Go back to the list. And here's Thrain Ironfoot. All right. So I was thinking I might add a filter feature here on the NPC list today, but I want to get this application into the hands of some users before I start adding more stuff to it. Because I want to get some feedback, because people who are not me might get into using this thing and have excellent ideas that I just would never come up with, or things that I've never thought of doing or what have you, that would improve the experience. Not to mention some other back end stuff, like I'm going to have to create an API integration for, and it's going to have to be a two-way API integration from whichever payment processor I end up using. I'm leaning towards Lemon Squeezy because they automatically calculate, collect, and submit sales tax for me in every jurisdiction in the US and several other countries. And that's not something I want to have to think about. They charge a little bit more per transaction, but that extra little bit more per transaction for me not having to research sales tax responsibilities in every state and several countries, implement it, maintain it, be liable for that code. They can have the extra 20 cents per $10 transaction to do all of that crap for me, and they actually become the merchant of record. So I don't even have legal exposure, as far as I know. But until I've got a business bank account, I don't even want to touch that stuff. So I think I'm going to bring this to market with a very, very limited invite-only cohort of I don't know, 5 to 10 people that I know that I can talk into subscribing to this and giving me some feedback. Because if five people are paying for my Azure costs, it'll also let me start actually collecting some real metrics and see where my performance issues are happening. And, invisible errors that I don't see when it's running on my machine or when I'm hitting the Azure deployment. So I was going to add some stuff, but I decided that today I'm going to be a little bit less exciting from a UI standpoint and work through some of these compiler warnings. because those things can really ruin your day. They're not a problem now, but they could become very troublesome. So quote a template SQL model.cs. Resource kind. All right. I don't want to make these nullable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add, not a cancellation token registration, a constructor. And let's fix all the things it's bitching about. So resource kind, resource category. Resource category, string.empty. What other object things have I got? Created date. You know what? Screw it. I'll add it. Created date UTC equals datetime.utc now. Save. I believe these are all overwritable. Yeah. And everything else is nullable. Save. Let's come in here. Token consumption model. Got to do the same thing. CTOR. And what's being complained about on this guy? User ID. String.empty. Who else is complaining? Inference time. No. UTC now. Function name. Prompt tokens, completion tokens, model ID. String.empty. Boop. And that should be good. User quota. User ID. String.empty. And fun fact, fixing these compiler warnings also can slightly speed up build times. Dang blasted, what's my created date? There. Save it. Close, 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 close. Now there's something in character vocation underscore name. Equals string dot empty. Saveroo. Boop. And I'm less concerned about these warnings in the test methods. User ID on user subscription SQL model. Must contain a non-null value. Save. Build. Clean. Rebuild. All right, we'll do, nope, user ID. Okay, so we got townsperson there. Townsfolk, manager.generate townsperson from options, dictionary, string is obsolete. You know what? Oh, look at that. Okay, I see how it is. I need to be using the townsfolk user options. All right, this is going to be a little bit more of an interesting refactor. So, right here inside our townsperson or generate townsperson public method, where it's taking everything in and saying just make it up, roll for everything. I'm using this dictionary of string and string, and some time ago I had altered that to take in an actual typed options type thing. So where were we? Oh, there's more of it here. Goodness gracious. Only for the console application. Okay, yeah, that's right. And I think I got rid of the console app. I sure did. Did I? Yeah, I did. Okay, so that can go away in a minute. This is in character workloads. Go away. I'll come back to those. So we can see here that we're doing selected options, which is just a dictionary, and all of this stuff. And we want to use townsfolk user options instead. So we'll just do that. We're not going to monkey with that. And I'm going to say options dot species equals selected species. I'll leave those comments here. Options dot profession equals NPC profession. And options dot background equals NPC background. And then instead of this one, I'm going to say NPC equals generate townsperson from options. Now, while we're doing the refactor, I'm just going to comment out the invocation of the deprecated version. We'll spin it up. Sign in. Excuse me. Go to NPCs, new, and we trigger that method just by hitting roll those dice without any stuff. And I'm going to hit this button a bunch of times. And I think we're good. That's an okay test. I think I'd like something a little bit more robust. We can come into Townsfolk Manager tests. Townsfolk Manager, get NPC options feature. I want add a new item. Go to Rec and Roll, I need a feature file. And this is generate townsperson. Scenario. Yeah, I'm not going to mess with that. Scenario is, well, first I'm going to add a summary for the feature. This feature accepts either 0, some, or all possible user selected attributes for the townsperson to generate. 0, some, or zero or any available user selected attributes for the townsperson to generate. For those attributes that are not specified, those attributes that are not specified, grammar, Rob, should be selected randomly from the lists provided by the rule set in use. Scenario. User. I am the documentation team. I am the QA team. I am the test team. User provides no selected attributes given the townsfolk manager is ready to generate NPCs when the user requests generation, requests an NPC with and the user provides no selected options, then the generate townsperson method will return a valid NPC. Save. Happy path. I believe I can do, yeah, that's good enough. Save. Now I need to define my steps. Okie dokie. And I'll just create those down to my step definition here. Generate townsperson step definitions. Now this is a form of testing called behavior-driven development. I have done systems in the past where I've done all of these feature definitions up front before I've written any code, sometimes before I've even defined the interfaces. And why do I do it then? Because the conversations that I end up having to have with the product manager, the stakeholders, the people that are requesting the functionality, will frequently reveal very important details that we're going to want to have before we start designing the actual code behind these features. Things like, how do they expect, or how do they want it to be, how do they want the system to behave when things aren't correct, when the user gives us bad data, so on and so forth. All of those details are what can really blow out the budget at the end of the project when, you know, the developers have been coding like mad for several sprints and they hand it off to the QA team, and the QA team immediately sends it back because they did something that wasn't in the requirements that really should have been. So this is, behavior-driven development is a really great way of also refining our requirements before we've started committing those requirements and their implementations to code. So let's get into defining some of these functions. Given the townsfolk manager is ready to generate NPCs. Now this is just XUnit in the background. I am going to need a private townsfolk manager. I think that's what I called it. We're going to find out. Yep, good. Boom. Private townsfolk manager. Test class. We're going to get this set up in just a minute. My townsfolk manager cannot directly contain members such as, oh, because I didn't put it inside the actual class. I'm a goose. Here's that. Okay, we're going to take 5 minutes because I'm going to go a little bit longer today, this morning, than I usually set aside. And I'm going to do the same thing this afternoon. Tomorrow morning, I have to skip. I do have a job interview, and it is round two of N. Hopefully, not too many. Um, but I am going to go take a quick bio break, and we'll dive back into this in about 5-10 minutes. We'll get this implemented. And there's a reason why I wanted to turn this from eyes on screen, hands on keyboard into some sort of automated thing. And I'll explain my reasoning for turning this into an actual unit test when I come back. So I'm going to hit the be right back. I am going to mute my microphone. You're welcome. Okay, so it's easy enough to spin up the app and hit roll the dice 15, 20 times, right? We're dealing with random numbers, and 15 or 20, and having to spin up the application to do that is kind of time consuming, and it doesn't give me the feedback that I want right away. Now, we know from our dice roller tests that we can run 250,000 tests in the span of about 20 seconds. And I want that same kind of confidence in this class, so that when I do start adding features to the NPC generation, or when I get back to adding features to the actual random NPC generation aspects, I'm going to know whether or not those pass or fail almost immediately. So, test class, we're going to need to assign that. And I believe this is an X unit. I could be wrong. Using rec and roll. Okay. So, public void pre scenario. Let's just call it set up scenario. And test class equals create valid townsfolk manager. This is going to be nullable. And bool valid manager is manager valid equals true. We're just going to add a little bit of stuffy here. Is manager valid? True. Else test class equals create invalid townsfolk manager. All right. Now, where are we going to put those guys? We're going to put those at the bottom of this test class. And I'm going to stuff them in a region. Private test utility methods. And region. Private townsfolk manager create valid. Oh, what's the darn? What did I call these methods? Copy, come down here. Pop up back here. Grab that. Zip down here. Yeah, I know. Private townsfolk manager. Paste. Okay. And var manager. No. Townsfolk manager. What's the name of the class? MGR. equals new townsfolk MGR. And we need to pass in rule set, NPC access, a shuffler, and a dice bag. So, I guess, rule set, NPC access, shuffler, dice bag. Now we need to define all those things. Var rule set equals new. No. What's the type on that? I rule set access. Rob, come on. Equals new, and I don't remember how I set that stuff up. Rule set access. Rule set access. Rule set provider. Oh, that's right. Oy. That ain't pretty. Save. New rule set provider. We need to use the contracts. There's that. Do I have all the necessary dependencies? Projects, rule set definitions, rule set access, townsfolk manager. Okay, we do have rule set definitions. I'm going to need to come out to the UI and see how I set up. I can shrink all this nonsense. See how I set up the rule sets down under create services. Here we go. So configuring services, HTTP, MS Graph. Here's all the scoped stuff. I feel like my mouse is running out of batteries. Or not. So, oh yeah, it's definitely getting sticky. So I'm going to grab those things in a minute. But there's server access. We're going to mock that in a minute. Add scope, usage meters, townsfolk. And I am going to very quickly, I think this guy takes one battery. If I can remember how I get into it. Oh no, it's rechargeable. That's okay. This will be a pain in the neck. But I'm going to let this thing eat for a few minutes. And I was just having a conversation over as a working musician, I've come to hate wires, but at the same time, I also don't trust wireless because they fail at the worst possible times. So semantic kernel provider, character workloads, NPC service proxy. No. It's not a magic mouse that charges on the bottom. I don't have one of those fancy ones. Add scope to townsfolk manager. Okay, now it's usage. It's all SQL stuff. Here's how I do the rule set access. Okay, good. Super handy. That makes life so much easier. So new rule set provider dot use 5ESRD. I think that's how I spelled it. Let's just grab that. Pop it back over here. No, this is just like a larger form factor, couple of button, like it's a Bluetooth mouse. And I have it because I am on a Mac and I've got limited USB ports, and I don't want to use up the limited USB ports on mice and keyboards. And honestly, all I really need to do to make sure they're always going to work is remember to plug them in now and then. And obviously I don't. So I need this, because the funny thing about extension methods in other assemblies is IntelliSense isn't real great at pulling that stuff in. And let's see here. Let's go back up to my test classes projects. I likely need to add the project as well. So rule set D&D 5e SRD. Okay. Save everything. That goes away. And I bet we're just going to do that for now, because I'm kind of sadistic to myself. But I'm also not going to implement Unhappy Path today. I just want to implement Happy Path. NPC access, I'm going to need to private INPC access, create NPC access mock. And we're going to, do I have mock installed? That's the question. I do. Good. INPC access. Wait. Mock INPC access. Oh, yes. I need to show my screen. Derp. Create NPC access mock. You know what? I'm going to need something more sophisticated eventually. But I know that for this particular thing, I'm not actually going to be calling out to the NPC access module. So PC access equals new mock of INPC access dot object. NPC access. What are the other things I need to pass in? And this is one of those things that is sort of me being a little bit obsessively clean and tidy about things that frequently drives people mad. But I like to have my parameters, especially when it's more than one or two, in a straight vertical column like that in the IDE. It drives some people absolutely bonkers, but it saves me from having to scroll back and forth, which drives me bonkers. So card shuffler, card deck, shuffler equals new. No, I'm not going to do a mock card deck. Instead, I'm just going to look at the engines. And there's no need to mock it because I know that the deck simulator and the dice bag have zero external dependencies. Deck simulator. Dice bag equals a new dice bag. Save. And now down here I can return my manager. I have to return it. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and set up all of this stuff. I'm going to do almost the same thing down there. And I realize that I'm doing things in a goofy way, but you know what? I'm going to have an externally valid manager class by doing this. But by setting up or by adding unconfigured mock objects as the provided dependencies, I'm creating an internally invalid townsfolk manager. Mock of card deck. Because it's going to try to call the methods on these objects, and they're just going to return, well, nothing. They're going to throw exceptions, if I'm not mistaken. Or nulls, where nulls are unexpected, and it's going to wreak havoc. So this here is now a completely invalid townsfolk manager. There is a way with Wreck and Roll to decorate this with a before scenario. I could run this before the scenario, or I could do this. Now, instead of before scenario, what before scenario does is it tells the test engine to run any method that's decorated with before scenario before each one of these. But because I know at some point I'm going to want to test what happens when a bad dependency is provided, I could get into before scenario block and all that nonsense, and I don't know what the hell I just did. But I think instead, I'm just going to invoke this setup scenario manually from my given. and say test class equals arrange, what did I call it? Oh, come on. Stop it. Set up scenario, rename, arrange, townsfolk manager. There we go. Arrange, townsfolk. Use the IntelliSense, Rob. And there we go. And because it's a void and doesn't return what I want like that, I just invoke it straight up. And then we can assert dot is not, nope, dot is true. Assert dot true. Yep, there it is. All of these unit testing things have different, slightly different things, different syntaxes, different method stacks, etc., etc. And all I want to do is go test class is not equal to null. And the user message, when the condition is false, the tests cannot be completed. The manager under test was not initialized. Save. So that's for setup. Now, normally in unit tests, we deal with the 3 A's: arrange, act, and assert. This is a little bit different with things like SpecFlow or Wreck and Roll. Wreck and Roll is a re-implementation of SpecFlow that's been brought up to date for more modern versions of the dotNet Core framework. I think SpecFlow's support beyond dotNet 6 doesn't exist, and I'm using dotNet 8, so Wreck and Roll it is. When the user requests an NPC, when the user provides no selected options. I think I'm going to contract those. I had originally split them out as different things. Without specifying options. I'm going to delete this, save. And actually, I do need to go back, and I need to define this step. And instead of just creating, I'm just going to copy it to the clipboard, highlight these two, and replace them. Now, because these tests need to be stateful, we need to read the result of the function into some variable. Var generated NPC equals test class dot generate townsperson. I'm going to unnullify that. That can no longer be nullable. Whatever. What's this complaining about? Did I not add a semicolon at the end? I sure didn't. You know, if you're so smart, Mr. Compiler, that you can tell when there's a missing semicolon, offer to add it, please. Although I also appreciate it not being clippy enough to just go ahead and assume it knows what I want. This potential null reference thing really kind of bothers me. Equals range. Heck with it. There. Maybe that'll shut it up. What are you complaining about now? Silly, silly thing. Oh, yeah, of course. All right, fine. Ugh. Test class equals. There. That gets rid of those pesky compiler warnings. Now, I am going to copy, paste that. This becomes private. And we're going to actually explicitly rerun that again. Test class. Spell it right. There. Test cannot be completed. The test class is null. Good deal. Now, back up to the top. Private townsperson, nullable, generated NPC. So because our verification or our assert of our scenario is actually in a different method, instead of assigning it to a local variable and asserting against that, we're actually going to assign the value of the method that we're testing to a member level for our step definitions and assert against that. Assert. So what makes up a valid NPC? We'll return a non-null instance of townsperson. A non-null value and the return value will not be null, and the return value will have a species. The return value will have a profession. I think I'm using the word vocation. And the return value will have a background. Excuse me. Now I'm going to save everything. And we're going to define these steps. I'm just going to copy them all to the clipboard. Now I don't know why it thinks the user requests are or that where or the when hasn't been defined, but let's see. Okay, so this is just a duplicate. Let's get rid of that. Save. And save. And let's go ahead and build just the Townsfolk Manager tests. And what that'll do is it'll do some stuff in the background and make it look like it's actually linked up. There we go. So, for each townsperson, generated NPC, and assert dot not null. There's not null. Now, because I just found it, I'm going to go not null up here and go test class. What are you complaining about? Takes 2 arguments. There. So assert not null test class. Good. Generate townsperson. Assert not null. And if I look at my feature definition, we'll return a non-null value and the return value will not be null. That's silly. So instead of this, the return value will be a townsperson instance. Define that step. Copy to clipboard. Come over here. Instead of this, which is just redundant, we have no need for Mojo Jojo tests. Assert dot is type townsperson. There we go. Assert dot true string dot is assert dot false. Sorry. Is null or white space generated NPC dot species and we'll null. Let's do the null coalesce. The species was not assigned. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and pop that down onto. Now let's take this. I like to let the commas trail. In SQL, I like to let the commas lead. But there we go. Now I can do the exact same thing. I'm just going to copy, and yeah, I know copy and pasting your code means you're repeating yourself needlessly. But frankly, for this situation, I'm not that concerned. Location was not assigned. Dot background dot name, and the background was not assigned. Save. Now let's try running this. Actually, I believe we need to build. We'll build the solution. Excuse me. Let's take a look at our test explorer. We'll pull this up the screen a little bit. I want Kevin of the Townsfolk Manager. Get NPC. Build, rebuild. Oh my goodness. Our cat is insistent. These tests haven't been run. So let's run this guy. Okay, it's discovering. Here we go. User provides no selected attributes. Come on. Run. And it worked. Okay, when the Townsfolk Manager is ready to generate NPCs, is done. When the user requests an NPC without specifying options, we're good. Will be a townsperson instance. The return value will have a species, a vocation, and a background. Good. Now, with BDD, that's really good at running something once. I want to see if there is a way with Rec and Roll. So I'm going to open up Safari and get myself a new window. Here we go. Rec and Roll. Run a feature n times automatically. Parallel execution. Hooks. Review before. Running a cucumber feature multiple times. Close enough. Yeah, give me the damn cookies. Ruby E500 times cucumber, whatever. Rake. Okay, so Ruby, that doesn't help me. If I were using Ruby, I would use it. But Let's see here. Gherkin reference. Breaker joins the game. Yeah. Automation features. Let's see. Binding step defs, hooks, step argument conversions, external assemblies, cucumbers, data table helpers, scenario context, feature context, executing scenarios. Scenarios from Visual Studio, that's great. Executing specific scenarios. Oh, stop that. Debugging output API. Mark steps as not implemented. Test category, but if you were using XUnit, then you should use category instead. Feature file done, automated. Blah, blah, blah. 2 scenarios. dotNet test, VS console, VS test console, DevOps Visual Studio test stack, dotNet core task. Not what I want. Apple T, run, rock and roll scenario multiple times automatically. Integration or system level tests. Gherkin reference multiple time execution of test scenarios. That's for Courgette. Run a scenario multiple times. That's for Gatling. Hooks. Blah, blah, blah. That's community.make. Process, whatever. Can be run in parallel with each other, also from different things. Execution behavior. Okay. So doing this as BDD or cucumber tests, I mean, it's a good demo. It's a really good demo of the concepts that we use. And that's fine. We've proven out, we've tested all of these details, right? But I want something a little bit more brutal is the word. So I could run these tests inside a more traditional unit test project, but I don't think I'm gonna. I think running them once is fine. It'll have to do because we are exercising the random generation inside the dice engine uh, pretty pretty heavily, and I think I can live with that. I think I can live with that just fine. So we now have a unit test or a test that we can use as we are going through the townsfolk manager and fixing these issues that we find. So we know that the generate townsperson from options is working. So I can rip that out. And I can tear this out. And this. And this. And finally, that. And I no longer need to initialize the dictionary. Goodbye. All right. Now, just because I'm super paranoid, let's go ahead and run all of our tests. And as you can see down here, there's like 1,530 tests, all of them passed. The bulk of the tests are up here in our dice engine tests, where I've written, 3 discrete test classes, but I've got, for each of these particular tests, some of them are running 80 iterations. Some of them are running 440 iterations or combinations of parameters. And each of these, I believe, is running either 100 or 1,000 executions of the test for each set of parameters. And the reason I'm doing that is because we are dealing with random numbers in here, and I want to make sure that we're getting a good sampling of all of the pips on the dice and all of the different combinations of things that could happen inside our random number generator. And because that's being exercised so rigorously, I feel okay that I don't need to do the exact same thing inside the generate townsperson feature. Now, as I work through the warnings or the other warnings in the townsfolk manager, I want to keep expanding those feature tests as I go. So when I get to the place where I'm working inside the method that we're generating the townsperson, but we're passing in selections from the user, I can go in and add new variations of those. Then the generated NPC will be a non-null value. It will be a townsperson. The species will be equal to what was passed in. The vocation will be not null. For instance, if we're just testing passing in the species. Things like that. So we'll be able to start building up combinations of all of those different things. Step definitions is the word I'm looking for. Let's take a look. Let's pop those open again. These guys. We'll look at the feature. It's a better way of seeing them. So I'll be able to say, given the townsfolk manager is ready to generate NPCs, when the user requests an NPC without specifying options, then the generate townsperson method will return a non-null value, and I'm going to be able to test the user specifying a species. I'm going to be able to test the user specifying only a vocation, only a background, and then any combination of those. And we're going to be able to make absolutely certain that under any circumstance, those those values for these the generated townsperson will be correct. And I think we're going to expand on that as we continue working through the compiler warnings I have in the townsperson or the townsfolk manager and the townsperson class this afternoon. So I'm going to call it a session because I've been going for almost 2 hours now. And we're going to pick up where we left off in this afternoon's session. So this afternoon is only going to be able to be an hour because I do have a call at 2:30. But yeah, thanks for joining me. My name is Rob, that developer dad, and happy coding. Take care, everybody.